Today we are going to be talking about Mega Drive controllers, or Genesis as you would call them in the States, North America. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking a typical controller you'd get like this off eBay. You buy it and you find that it's filthy, and most likely you'll have buttons that don't quite respond quite properly. Usually you find that these buttons are dropping inputs because they're not working properly. You have to push hard. You might find you push hard, or you find the D-pad's not working. Also, they're usually quite dirty as well, so you find that these letter buttons are filled with muck, skin, hand grease and dirt, same with this little thing here and whatnot, and it's just generally untidy. Occasionally you'll get dirt in the controller port there, which will also affect these buttons. So what we'll do is we'll take this apart and I'll show you how you can do this at home quite easily. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this apart and we're going to clean it down, and hopefully we'll get it back up and running, no bother, and hopefully you'll be able to do the same with yours. The first thing we're going to need is a small crosshead screwdriver to take out the 6 screws at the back. Now do yourself a justice and get yourself, if you haven't got one already, a small screwdriver. Now it doesn't have to be any particular size as long as it's not too big. Quite a few times I've seen these come and the back is all mashed up because someone's just tried to ram a crosshead screwdriver that they have somewhere, which will probably work to maybe get this one out because it's quite a shallow hole, but the rest of them, you see that it's the others you'll find that this recess is totally mashed up because they've just tried getting it down in there. So as long as you've got a screwdriver that fits in there and you can feel it positively sort of click into that screw, this should be fine. So we're going to take these 6 screws out and we'll be back. So we have removed each of these 6 screws and we just tipped it out and made sure that they're all just together there. Hopefully none of them fall on the floor, because sod's law, they'll fall off and bounce and you'll never find them again. Yeah, it happens. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that it's face down when we take the back of the case off. Otherwise, if you take the front off, again, the buttons will fall out all over the place and then you'll be annoyed. Now we've got the back of the case off, what we're going to do is we can just ease this strain relief out of the case, and you'll find that the board comes out, revealing the inside. Hopefully there's no horrors in here. There's been a few occasions where I've found, well, usually bits of fluff and whatnot. On one occasion I found a toenail clipping, however, that I got inside. I do not know. It was disgusting. It went in the bin. I got over it. It's fine. Setting this aside, we're just going to push it to the side there. We're going to bring in this board, and the first thing we'll point out, we'll talk about these contact pads. So that's the start button, A, B, C, directional pads. And for those who don't know, the way these controllers work is that there's a chip on the back here, and each pin goes off to one of these pads, and the pads are a dead end basically. The pads are a dead end, and what happens is that we've got these rubber membranes that sit on here, and when you push the button, this conductive material, it creates a short. You'll see that they have interlocking contact pads there, copper pads. So when you push that button down, the conductive material creates a short between this pad and this ground pin. When you push it down, this pin is shorted to ground, so this chip then sort of passes that message along to to your wires off to the console that button has been pressed, and that's how it works. So what we'll find is that when you're pushing the button and it's not responding, or you have to push hard, is that this, for whatever reason, either these pads are dirty, these copper pads are dirty, or this conductive material is dirty, so that circuit has not been completed. So what we have to do is we have to clean this copper material up, which we can see here just about, is that there is some dirt on there. I've not actually tested this controller yet. This is out of my bag of to do, but I have a feeling that you'll tend to find anyway that most games only, they mostly utilize the A and B button. So you'll find that the A and B button are the most unresponsive. The C is rarely at fault. There are a few different styles of controllers. The biggest variation that you'll see is potentially different on yours is the way that this D-pad is laid out, that is working. This one, you'll see that there is a divot here. It's actually resting right on the copper trace. If we look at the other side of the case, we'll take off this membrane. We'll take out this D-pad. You find that here it's resting on a ball point. When you press on each directional button, it rocks around on this chap and pushes down each of these directions. So if you're finding that your directional buttons aren't working properly, you will most likely find that either these pads are dirty, or these are dirty or corroded, or that in a very unlikely circumstance that pivot has actually worn through that trace. I've never seen that happen, but I've always been very conscious that it could happen, and it's something you check for there. So if that trace were to go, you would find that the down and right buttons wouldn't work. Fortunately, in this circumstance, none of the traces seem damaged, none of the copper seems corroded, and you'll find that this is just a cleaning job. Whereas, say for example, that were to be severed, those two buttons wouldn't work. And occasionally you'll find if someone spilled something on the controller, quite a few times I've seen any of these pads be corroded. If it happens on the mesh, the interlocking mesh of the copper trace, like if it's quite severely damaged, you'll find that your board is pretty much unsalvageable, unfortunately. If you were to open it up and find that that mesh, or like maybe two of the pins are gone in that mesh, it's going to be just a case of replacing the controller. Unfortunately, it's not something you can really repair. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is we are going to clean up these copper traces. You can just about see that there is some dirt on those traces there. So if I can catch that there, yeah, we can catch that on camera. Is that there is some dirt on there, and that will unfortunately affect the conductivity of those pads. We're going to try and do our best to clean those up. Hopefully make this controller a lot more responsive. Now, the way you could do this is to use any sort of cleaning solution, a fairly gentle cleaning solution, I guess. Something like a window cleaner, is to spray it on there and just give it a bit of a rub with a cloth down, and hopefully that will remove any sort of contaminants on those pads. Now, the way I do it is, it saves on a lot of hassle and a lot of effort and work, is to use a product like cream cleaner. Now, this is the sort of thing you use to clean your bathtubs or shower trays or something like that. It works quite well through cutting through, as it says, cuts through grease. We don't care about the stains, really. Go on. So this works quite well for taking out a lot of the grease that might be on there that's built up off people's fingers. Also, I'm not sure about all these type of products, but this one is quite good in the sense that it has like a microabrasion in it. So if you have any sort of cleaner that has microabrasives in it, what we're going to do is we're going to put a tiny dab on there. I mean, this bottle's lasted me forever. We're going to just put like a drop, maybe like 2 or 3 drops on the whole thing. Maybe like 1 or 2 drops on here, 1 or 2 drops on here. And if we just take a cloth and we give it a bit of a rub, we'll find that it just cuts straight through those, cuts through grease, as it says on the tub. I have just given that a quick rub around with a bit of that cleaner, and hopefully we'll be able to see that it is substantially better. 8 times out of 10, that's all you're going to need to get this controller working again. However, that is not going to be the best your controller can be. There is still the case of the other side of the story of these contact pads. So what you could do is, I wouldn't use this cleaner. Use something like a glass cleaner or watered down vinegar to maybe like a 50-50 ratio there. And just you put that on maybe with a cotton tip, or maybe just put a dab on and use like an old toothbrush to get in there and clean those. These aren't too bad. You see this sort of getting there, getting a bit glossy like that, and that's when they become less effective. To upgrade our gamer experience, what we need to do is we need to make these pads more conductive to electricity. So when you press that button down, it lets that electricity flow through more freely without having to apply as much force. So you want the feather touch responsiveness. So when you press that button, it recognises it straight away. You don't want to have to mash that key down to get it to respond. Otherwise, you're going to end up falling into a pit of spikes or something ridiculous. And you're going to go, oh no, I pressed that button and it didn't jump. That's because this fella is not conducting electricity. What's more conductive than rubber, or this material? Metal. Metal is more conductive than rubber. So you're going to say to yourself, well, what are you going to do with a bit of foil? Because how am I going to put that in there to make it more responsive? What you can do is you can take a small piece of this tape, and with it being sticky, you can stick it to each of these pads, these 8 pads, and your controller will then be using metal to conduct electricity. What you could do is just cut small sections off, so cut like maybe a corner off there and stick it in the middle there. It doesn't have to be perfect, as long as it's got a little bit of material on there so it can conduct the electricity between those pads. But if you notice, they're circle, and it just so happens that those circles are round about the same size as a... So what we do is we take this metal foil and we put it through and we push it. A perfectly formed circle will pop out of this side, ready to peel the little back off and stick onto there. Once that's done, your pads will be super responsive. You won't even know it hit you with it being so fantastically functional. And you will thank me. You will thank me to no end. So like I was saying, I take one piece out of here, we pick it up, and as we pick it up, because of the curl on the hole punch, it's practically taking the backing tape off for us, and then we just bring it in and stick it on there. A few minutes later, we have all the pads resurfaced with this lovely metallic surface. This is the best any of these controllers can get. The material that comes standard with these pads is quite poor, and over the years it perishes and makes it even worse. So these metallic pads on here will make your controller work absolutely fantastically. You'll be shocked, as most people are. So we could stop here. Functionally, it would be perfect, but what about the case? What about the case? This is someone else's dirt, someone else's hand grease. Their takeaways or whatever they've had on their hands while they've been playing, having their little gaming sessions. Look at that. You don't want to be touching that. You don't want to be having your hands all over those. What we can do as a bonus is we'll clean up the back as well. Any holes, any of these screws as well, we'll get a quick clean. And what we can also do is we'll use a product on there which will bring this black out nicely there, and it'll bring it looking fantastic as well. There are a few ways you can go about cleaning all the little crevices of these cases and the buttons. There's a few different levels you can go to depending on how much you want to do this. If you want to do it as a one-off, I would recommend doing it one way. If you wanted to do this as a production, as to do this, quite a few of these to sell on eBay or whatever, I would have another suggestion for you. Something like, again, something like a window cleaner, a glass cleaner, like those lines, or just a hot soapy water or something like that. Just stick it in. I would take this plastic, because you're not going to damage it, is to take this and submerge it in some warm soapy water for a few minutes. And what that'll do is it'll soften up quite a lot of this dirt, and it'll come away quite easily. What we'd do is we take our old trusty toothbrush that we no longer need, no longer is required. We'll take it and we can just scrub into those grooves, and after you've soaked it, those joints will come out absolutely gleaming. And then we can do the same thing with these as well. We can just soak these, and we could just get in there with the old bristles, quite a stiff brush will work. I mean, this is an old kid's toothbrush, but this is it's got fairly stiff bristles on here. So getting in there, scrubbing in there, and then it'll just work out this dirt perfectly. And then what we'll do is with the toothbrush is you see these screws that came at the back, they're a bit dusty, a bit dirty. You just brush off that dirt, and it'll just make it look much better than having this fluff on it. So we'll come back. What I'll do is I will clean these grooves out again. Don't forget these, like in the crevices there where you can see also. So this other side of it, just clean along here. Maybe if you have something like a cloth to go along there, and that will just rub off, especially after you've soaked it. And that will, because that is actually visible when you put the case back together. Now, aside from the case, you also want to consider these, the cable as well. So you look at the strain relief as well on these, and also the grips on the plug. You'll find there's a lot of dirt in there, so getting things like the bristles of the toothbrush in there will work wonders. Also, if you were wanting to do maybe a few of these controllers and make it a little bit easier, what I did was dug out an old electric toothbrush I had. It saves a lot of elbow grease if this is like soaked up, and you'd stick the little electric toothbrush on there. It just does the hard work of getting into those grooves, all the little grooves and little directions for you. It might be worth doing that, considering that, to speed things up a bit. One thing I forgot to mention before is to clean down in these screw holes. What I tend to do is just to use a cotton bud. You see, this one's had a good workout getting these clean. So clean up in the screw holes. Also helps if you want to clean up in this start recess there as well. So if you get a cotton bud in there. As you can see, I've also done the D-pad as well. So it's good to get into these recesses here, and also to remember to go along the edge of the controller as well, because if you don't clean that, when it's back together again, you'll see the white or the dirt or whatever down the side of the controller there. It just sort of ruins the effect there. After you've cleaned it all, it'll look maybe a bit tarnished now that you've taken off some of the dirt and maybe taken off there's all this stuff that's been built up over the years. So it's not going to look the most amazing colour. It's not going to really jump out to you, but hopefully we'll resolve that next. So what I like to do after I clean all this is to use a product on this, which is this Auto Glime bumper and trim gel. I've tried a few other ones, but they tend to just sort of leave the surface quite greasy. But the stuff with this is that when you rub it in, if you put on like a small amount, it gets the benefit of looking really nice, but it doesn't leave you with that greasy feel to it. What we're going to do is we're going to put a tiny, like maybe 2 or 3 drops on here, and then rub it all over. But then after we do that, we'll use a dry cloth to rub it really quite a lot, just to take off any residual product off the plastic. And we do want to put a tiny bit on the buttons. Like ideally, we want to get like the smallest like whiff onto the buttons, really, or onto the D-pad. Make sure we pay extra attention to get it off again, so to get off any residue that's been left on there. So we'll do that now. We'll put a bit of that on, and we'll buff it out as well, and you'll see that it looks absolutely dandy. After putting that on there, just to show you how much like you need, if anything, that's enough really. I wouldn't necessarily rub it all from there. What I do is to dab it there and then move it somewhere else, because if you try to rub it there, it's not going to get very far. So we've got a big block, a drop there. So to take a dab it somewhere else, and just dab it around in a few spots, place it around, and then rub it around. Otherwise you're not going to get full coverage, and that's just the easiest way to do it, I find. And now we've got it all back together. Just everything back in reverse. So we got it back together again, all 6 screws back in, nice and clean, as you'll see. This little brush of the toothbrush, and all the fluff came off. So as you can see, this now looks a lot better, and it will function perfectly as well. We've got those new pads in. For the first few minutes, if the first few presses, you might find that it's not 100%, but what I would do is just go along and just give each of these a nice good press, so the metallic pad, it finds its shape. So amongst those copper pads, it'll just get the right shape. And so yes, it takes a bit of effort. If you're doing it as a one-off to get your controller up to spec, then that's fine. If you want to do more, like if you're selling these on eBay, whatever you want to make a production of them, then this is going to get a little bit tedious. So what I did eventually, after doing many of these by hand, is I bought a 10-litre ultrasonic cleaner. So basically I can take these apart and I can stick maybe 5 or 6 of those in the cleaner for 3 or 4 minutes each. And when it comes out, basically it gets rid of all this dirt from it. So it removes this whole cleaning process for me. Take it apart, put the shells and the buttons and the rubber membranes in, throw it in this hot bubbly bath, and set the ultrasonic cleaning away for, like I say, 3 or 4 minutes, maybe a bit longer if it's worse. The dirt falls off, basically. So what I tend to do is do that, because it's a bit of a pain setting it up. I mean, you've got to put the water in and heat it up, and then you've got to get rid of the water and stuff. So I'll save that for another video. I'll show you guys how I do that. But for the casual home gamer, that's not really it's not really something you have to concern yourself over. But that's something I do, because I just do so many controls. I go through them, so that just saves hours and hours. In the next couple of days, weeks, whatever, I'm going to be restoring a batch of N64 controllers. So I'll be firing up the ultrasonic cleaner. So I'll make a video then about how to do that, if you're interested. If you are interested in this kind of thing, feel free to subscribe, like, share, all that nonsense. And in the description I will put links to my Instagram as well, where you can follow. If you're interested, again, you can follow me. I might put a link in for this to Amazon or whatever, but you can Google it, I'm sure. Yeah, that's it basically. Hopefully you've learned something. Hopefully it's been interesting to watch. Hopefully you've come away a better person for it. So if this is something you're interested in, I'll be doing other videos, I'm sure, on different N64 controllers and some other bits and bobs. So as I do that, I'll maybe make some more videos, see how it goes. So if you're interested, again, subscribe and all that. Share, don't share, like, don't like, dislike, whatever. Do what you want.